Dr. Shish Kumar has been with CDAC since 1987 after completing his BTech from IIT Madras. Further, he did his MTech from IISc Bangalore and doctorate from BITS Pilani. His areas of interest are artificial intelligence, robotics, and educational technology. He has co-authored two books. One is with Prentice Hall on parallel computing. 7 students have completed their PhD under his guidance, and 3 are in progress. He has initiated and nurtured a number of projects in the area of AI and e-learning during his career. Dr. Shishkumar has over 100 publications so far. He is program committee member in a number
I
of.
think we can skip all that remaining what also. We don't. What we have to say is more important.
Yeah. Delivers invited talk, sir. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, I hope I am audible and I am visible and my slide is visible.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
So I'm very happy to see Professor Mangal Sundar is sitting in this talk, and because at this OLAPS actually started with him. I think he was the working member of working group at the time we started, and so I'm happy to be able to share some thoughts and updates with respect to that to him as well. Yeah, so. So, in a nutshell, OLAPS is today. Yeah, yes.
I took leave from IIT today to listen to every one of you. If I could listen to every one of you, because I think all of you teach a lot of things over the years, so many different things. I can't get so many techniques in one gamut and in one format like what CDAC is doing. So thank you. Thanks for mentioning, but I think you did what you have to do. All I did was to stay behind and support.
But that's very important, because sometimes that kills good ideas. So today we have on the OLAPS platform 170 plus virtual labs covering all the 3 science subjects: physics, chemistry, biology, maths, and some English labs, basically focused on school students. It is a resource that we have made freely available on the web. It is the website is olaps.edu.in, and anyone can go and access any of those labs without any hindrance. We started this journey about 10 years back, I think 2010, and we are very happy to be on course on this. So we have about 54 physics labs, 46 chemistry labs, 36 biology labs, 25 maths labs, and 12 English labs. English lab was actually more of an experiment to see whether this idea of labs can actually be extended to languages, and we are happy that we could actually come up with nice models of doing teaching English also. Altogether, we have 173 labs aiming for classes 9, 10, 11, 12. Not all of it is covering all the classes, but that's kind of representative. And these labs we have made available in English, Hindi, Malayalam, and Marathi. The later 2 more of and this is done in partnership with Amrita University, so that's why when the Malayalam comes and Marathi because we are in Bombay, and Hindi as a national language. So we have actually seen people showing interest to adapt these to Telugu, to Bengali and Kannada and all that. Some effort on voluntary effort is actually going on in with respect to that. So as I mentioned, we started I think around 2010-11 time. We submitted a proposal. We were told that we should do a pilot with a few labs and see how things go. So we did 30 labs in about 1 to 2 year time. We showed it to CBSE. The CBSE chairman endorsed it, saying that it's a very good initiative. And then we went for the next phase, which was about 170 labs. Again, reviews by CBSE, and at the end of it, we could actually make it available on NKN on a nationwide basis. Of course, being a web means that anybody across the world can actually use it. But then MIT actually came up with the suggestion that if you just build it and leave it, it possibly won't have the impact. So make an effort to go out and reach to the teachers who to make use of them. So we had a rollout project in 2015 to 20, about 5 years. As of today, we have trained about 40,000 teachers across India, mostly from CBSE schools and some from the state board. And of course, 2020 pandemic has been a big impact, because as I will mention later, that has actually kind of made OLAPS into a very strong, prominent support for the ministry and for the schools in the country. So, okay, so that's where Olaf says, so if you kind of step back from it and say, okay, what is it that we were trying to do? Where are we? And what are the current challenges? So, I mean, this slide, I think it doesn't need too much of explanation, so I'm going to skip too much of it. So, laboratories is recognized as important devices in the learning process. Okay, and particularly for higher order thinking skills and practical realization of the concept that has been learned and so on. So hands-on feel for the lessons learned, that was one objective for doing lab. So you talk about Hooke's law, but you actually put a weight and see the pendulum actually oscillates and come to stop. So you actually get how does it actually look work in reality. Connecting the theory to the reality, so you learn about lots of Newton's law of motion and things like that. So again, you want to conduct an experiment to kind of demonstrate it, so kind of reinforce it, and that certainly goes a long way in enhancing the retention and understanding of the concepts. Focus on experiment as a key paradigm in science. So sometimes labs are used to kind of explore something beyond what is taught in the class. So it is encouraging that experimenting practice. So you try out various combinations and say, oh, so this is how it works. So you seed the basic idea of performing an experiment and try to establish or confirm a hypothesis. So that's also one motivation for some of the subjects. And of course, better internalization of the content, because a lab is where the student is directly involved. He performs an activity, he's getting feedback, he's actually dealing with the real life-ish entities. So there is a much better depth of understanding. So as the quote says, tell me I will forget, show me I may remember, involve me I will understand. So a lab is actually giving you an opportunity to do involve me. So which is what you do build in interactive content. However, the cost and space requirements for physical infrastructure and equipment is a big concern at many places, and we know that we have a lot of schools in the country which is possibly run on a single or a couple of classrooms with the few teachers. So for them to set up physics, chemistry, biology, and various subject labs for all the classes with appropriate instruments and things is actually a big challenge. So there are many people who have been denied getting any lab experience because they don't have access to it. Of course, even if you have access to it, the cost of raw material. So if you want to do magnesium burning, you have to keep purchasing magnesium for each batch and replenish the stock. And you get limited access, and the whole class of let's say 8th standard is taken to the lab, and they do perform the experiment more or less in kind of discordant synchronization, and then now after the 45 minutes or 1 hour you are back to your class. So the individual attention is missing. The actual realization of the lab could also be a challenge. And of course, I think as the chairman CBSE also mentioned, the Divyang students is still something that is very underattended as far as our physical labs are concerned. How much support can we build for them? So it is not that the physical lab as is being practiced today is the solution to the problem. Yes, it does give you a lot of advantages, because as I said, there is something, you go to the lab, you actually test, touch the test tubes, you can smell hydrogen sulfide, you can actually, see the reactions taking place or the temperature rising. So obviously it makes a lot of sense, but these challenges also exist. So virtual labs could be seen as partly addressing this problem that we talked about. So there are two concepts called virtual labs and remote labs. So virtual labs is you basically called a simulation labs. You simulate an activity or a process in the computer and show the different properties of that to the student. So when you do, let's say, Hooke's law on in physics, you actually simulate the compression and expansion of a spring when it is stretched, right? So you have formulas, you simulate it, and then you put a particular weight, you show how much it has been stretched, and you show, but another weight. So these are all computed inside. So there is obviously there is no real spin. So these are simulation labs. So the one good thing about simulation labs is it is easily replicable. So anybody can make a copy of it and run the labs on their own. The another version of labs is called remote labs. So here it is actually a physical equipment sitting someplace which is provided access remotely for manipulation. So if I have maybe an electron microscope or something in my office, I can actually provide online access to a lot of students across the country. But obviously, only one student can access that equipment at any time. And there are a lot of controls that apply because the equipment is physically sitting in my place. So obviously, my rules and regulations apply. So, but however, there are many expensive equipments where the idea of remote labs actually been practiced also. But mostly, I'm going to talk about the virtual labs aspect today. So, as I mentioned, virtual labs means we are talking about simulation-driven labs. So the main advantage of it is that it's unconstrained availability. So you host it on the web, or you can distribute it to multiple websites to give it to different schools. So people can use it any time of day, night, whatever they want. And once the development is done, it's a trivial cost because you just go to the net and then just read. It's like sharing a news article or whatever. However, the development cost can be very high. So it's a huge amount of effort that is involved in coming up with an appropriate design, proper user experience, the testing and validation. So they do take a lot of time. It's actually full software development that we are talking about. So and simulations are an attempt to mimic the reality, but it is not necessarily a complete reflection of reality. So for example, when you do, let's say, the same Hooke's law where you put the weights and the spring expands, by the theory that this expansion is not infinitely stretchable. If you put a very large weight, it may not necessarily match the Hooke's law at all. It matches within certain limit. So it's important to choose the weights and within that appropriate limit. So you may ask the question, so what happens if I put a very small weight, or what happens if I put a very large weight? So simulations usually do not address them. They say, okay, no, for this lab, this is all that is required. Or when you are boiling water, what happens if you don't switch off the burner and the water completely boils away, that is evaporates? Then obviously the beaker will get hot, it might start melting. So no simulation actually goes to that level. Once the water is evaporated, it kind of stops there, right? So within that realm of the attention or the focus of the lab, it does a pretty good job of imitating reality. So so as I said, there are boundaries which are ignored. So the spring has a linearity region within which only Hooke's law will apply. There are new opportunities, of course, which is another great advantage of using virtual labs. So when you show a pendulum in the class, you are constrained by being on Earth. Suppose I want to talk about how it is going to happen in Moon or Jupiter. In simulated labs, I can change the gravity, and actually I can show you how the period or the oscillation will change when you go to a different place. And you can also manipulate the timeline. So if I want to show how a fire grows, or when I want to show very fast reactions or things like that, it is very difficult to show that in an understandable form in a classroom, right? Even if you could actually replicate it. So because the time scale is controlled by the process itself, so I don't have any control over it. Whereas in a simulation, you can slow down the fast reactions, you can speed up the slow reactions. So it provides me an ability to control how that reaction is going to take up. So let's say something like a life cycle of mosquito, I can do it in 2 minutes, okay, which is something that happens over multiple days in real life. So how effective are these virtual labs? And it is not like virtual labs is a very new idea. There are literature going back to 1980, 1990, where people have been talking about virtual labs. So many people believe that this is a big enabler, okay, and particularly where the infrastructure is not adequate. But there are also who believe that these are inhibitors because of the limitation of the simulation. That if you can't simulate in the indefinite scope, then you accidentally going and burning something out and then realizing, oh, okay, this does not apply to those regions, is something that you are stopping. Of course, we can't really do much about it. But there is still possibly more work required to do virtual labs versus physical labs, and also the kind of gains from the labs in terms of the impact on learning and retention of information and things like that. So one of the things that we have realized in the OLABS context is that the core of the lab is a simulator which actually understands how much a spring should stretch when weights are added to it. But if you just leave it as a simulator, and there are plenty of them available already on the net, they don't actually help to complete labs, because you need to build the ecosystem. So you need a theory that is relevant to the lab. You need to understand the process. So you will need to explain that. You may require, let's say, plotting mechanism, or actually putting a scale and measuring the elongation. So if you don't provide for these things, then the lab becomes very difficult to integrate into the curriculum. And I think one of the great lessons, or one of the reasons for OLAB success is the completely integrated environment is provided to the teacher and the students. He doesn't have to leave that lab environment for doing any of these activities at all. So if you have to plot a graph, we will actually provide a plot for him. You only have to enter the values and the plot will come. And if you want to measure something, we'll give him a scale. So you can put that virtual scale on the screen and actually measure the length and then enter the value. So we have actually simulated that entire field, and that has gone a long way in providing a better experience. So this is one snapshot of one of the labs about Ohm's law. So you can see that particularly in physics and chemistry, even the look and feel we have tried to maintain. So you get a real feel of the lab when you actually go to the simulated environment. Okay, so that is where we are. So what are the things that we see today in terms of whatever happened? And as our Jaydeep Mishra ji also mentioned, during the pandemic, OLABS has been a big lifesaver, or kind of learning saver for many students. And CBSE has openly said that, but for OLABS, the practical component would have suffered very, very badly. So it was received very well. But we want to come back and say, what is it that we are learning from it? How do we actually move forward? So one question which is still an open question is the evaluation of labs. How effective are these labs? What are the different affordances which improves learning or retards learning? These are things which is still an open area, and not too much work seems to have been done in that area. Another problem that we found was proper and timely guidance, because our use case when we did OLABS was that a teacher would introduce labs in the classroom, and then the student will be guided, or the student will be told, okay, now you go and perform this activity at home or in the lab, and maybe come back and do some discussion. And what we realized in the pandemic mode was that there was no real teacher coming in the class at all. I mean, there might have been, but then the scenario actually got changed. So many students were going onto the OLABS platform without any prior exposure to it. So people obviously would get confused. Now, what should I do next? And if I do something, what are the feedback and things like that? So that was something that we needed to look at. We wanted to look at the immersive experience, interest, and non-science subjects, which I'll talk about in the next few slides. So guidance in the lab for providing, I think what Sharath talked about, automated guidance using AI, etc. You need a very, very rich model of the lab for providing automated guidance. Okay, the lab itself, simulation based, this is a complex entity. So modeling that in order to generate guidance is actually much harder task. Okay, so when you want to look at it, but it is as of now a very difficult thing. And having a physical teacher around all the time is also going to be expensive and not feasible, particularly in situations like this. And we saw a lot of students exploring labs on their own. So this was not an anticipated use case. So that was something that got us to think and say, what do we do? So some of the things that we are looking at is guided lab. So there could be some kind of an agent or a representation of a teacher in the lab when the student actually goes to the lab. Okay, and the teacher would be actually monitoring what is happening around, and whenever you are stuck or you do something wrong, the teacher can actually intervene and say, actually, first you need to do this. So you first, put the vessel and then put the burner on. So these kind of advices could be done so that there is a kind of a presence of a teacher when the student is actually doing the lab, and particularly for the more complex lab, this is going to be very important. Another idea we are looking at is peer labs. So how two students go to the lab together. So when you log in, you actually see that other student is also there, kind of like Second Life or something like those environment. So you can talk to the other student in appropriate forum to kind of discuss and say, oh, this is this we should not do. What would have happened to this? So there is more collaboration, peer learning, and peer review that's happening there. So these are two of the things that we are actually now trying to look at taking OLAPs further. The second point I mentioned is immersive experience. So as of now, if you look at any of these interventions, you are actually seeing, I mean, you are sitting in a room like this, your chair or in your this thing, and then watching the screen. Everything that's happening about the lab is in the screen. And so how do I control? I have my only controlling device that I have is, keyboard or mouse basically, right? So, and when I look behind around, there is no lab, right? My lab is only in the screen. So providing a more immersive environment by maybe capturing more of the lab atmosphere, or maybe again, like somebody was talking about, a virtual reality headset. So once I put a headset, I can actually feel the lab around me. So you can possibly see other students performing the lab, or maybe see, what are the other things that is in the lab. So you can actually get a more realistic feel of the lab, maybe using these kind of ideas. So you can now, when you move your head, the view automatically will change in the VR mode. So these can actually make the lab experience much deeper. But again, these are not very trivial to implement. There are lots of aspects to be looked at, but this is certainly worth looking at going further. The another point to look at is improved user or usage experience. So as I mentioned, when there is a knob on the ammeter which I have to do, I don't actually turn the knob because there is no way for me to access the knob. I will use a slider and I use my mouse to move the slider, and that will turn equivalent to turning the knob. It would be nice if I can actually kind of turn the knob by some activity. So gesture is one option. So I can actually show and then, use my hand and say, turn my ammeter, and I can actually get a better way of how these are actually used. So currently the user experience is more of the traditional computer experience. You don't actually feel that you are actually manipulating the lab. So when you want to pour some hydrochloric acid into a beaker, you click a button and it pours there. So I don't have a feel of lifting that beaker and then actually pouring the acid into the test tube or into the beaker for experimenting. So providing more realistic and natural manipulator is something that we would like to look at there. So gesture is one option which is kind of available in basic technology, but we need to look at whether we can build that into the lab. Speech is something also could be used, again, not a very realistic way in a lab, but it could be maybe in some cases could be more natural. An interesting area to look at is haptic devices. So these are like, for example, I could, of course, this has a challenge that how do I make these devices available to the larger number of students in the country? But maybe that's something that we'll have to look at. But let's say if I could actually create, knob-like devices and make that also available to the student. Whenever there is a knob on the screen, you can actually use the knob device that is there to turn. Right. So it is also useful to feel temperature, feel pressure. So because haptic devices are two-way interfaces. So these are something that I think we should look at because that can actually enhance the lab experience of students. Retaining interest, gamification. I mean, educational games and gamification is something that I'm very actively working on these days. So gamification is a known technique to bring elements of a game to a non-game environment. So the idea is that when you are playing a game, you are completely immersed. You can stay focused without any distraction. Even if you call for lunch or dinner, you'll say no, I'm going to finish this game, right? So you are able to maintain what is called a flow mode for the user. So there's something called a flow theory, which actually talks about it. So maybe we could actually try to bring in some of the gamification elements into it. And one of my colleagues, Archana, is now going to explore this as part of her PhD work in gamifying virtual labs, structural gamification as well as content gamification. So providing a competitive environment for students. So you can also kind of see, if you look at one school, which student has done most labs, who was the most accurate or the best performer. So these kind of things can also be brought into it. So these were not part of the labs currently, but this is something that again we could actually look at to build up a better overall experience. Many schools have said, can I get the student score of having performed the lab? Again, that was not a use case we had in mind at that time. So we said no, right now no, but we would like to look at whether something like that can be done ongoing further. Another challenge we are looking at is non-science subjects. So for physics, chemistry, biology, labs are well defined. They are documented in your textbook or lab manual, so you can just kind of simulate or implement them. But if you take something like mathematics, languages, social sciences, it is not that clear. So we want to come up with activities which would look like labs, which would actually deepen the learning, but may not be performing like an experiment. So mathematics, we did about 25 activities, which was also very good. So if you want to look at a theorem, you can actually pick up some random triangle, draw the bisectors and see where they intersect and say, well, let me try another triangle. Then you can get another triangle. So you can, iterate it as many times as you need to believe that, yes, they do have this behavior. Languages was a bigger challenge. I'll come back to it in my next slide. And social sciences is also a very open challenge, like geography, history. There are ideas like geography. People talk about Google Map or devices like that could be used to teach geography. But how do we build a lab environment there? So that's also a challenge that we are now trying to look at it. So it would be nice to create a lab environment which could do that. So language labs, I think our challenge was, can we use the same idea for labs like languages like English, Hindi? So we did for English about 15 labs. There are 4 aspects to language learning, right? There is some support for reading, writing, listening, and speaking. And for overall in the language, you want to look at the grammar and the pronunciation. Pronunciation related to speaking and listening, and the rest for reading and writing. So, and at a higher level, you also want to look at coherence, organization, style, etc., which is a much harder problem today to look at. So, and the pronunciation, that is listening and speaking required ASR and TTS systems, that is speech recognition and speech synthesis, which is slowly becoming available now. So we actually did not do much focus on that. So we looked at basically grammar to say we will work on voice conversion, tense conversion, proposition, and those kind of things. And we actually came up with a good set of labs. So this is a snapshot of one of the labs. And I think the main challenge we were looking at was, how do we give feedback to the student? So it should not just say that your answer is wrong. You should be able to give constructive feedback so that he can fix them one by one. So for example, here, you can see one of them say that helping verb is incorrectly placed, should precede the main verb. So he knows that the is they need to be handled separately, right? So is should be preceding drunk. So what we have been able to do is to provide enough, natural language processing and AI in it, that it could actually look at violations of rules and give very specific feedback, so the user can actually go and address each of the feedback, and eventually he can get the whole exercise right. So feedback will be very specific to the solution, and it required analysis of the solution versus the expected solution. So there is a lot of UI level things, and as well as modeling issues that we are needed to do, and that we have actually done. So adequate variety. And the second question was that many of the language labs, what they do is they have a canned set of sentences. So after you do about 10 or 20, you are kind of done. You come back and start repeating that sentence. So we said, no, even if I do 1,000,000 times, you should not end up repeating the sentences, right? So what we said, okay, we will not do can't a repository of sentence, but we will generate a sentence subject to certain specifications. So we, again, if you want to generate a sentence, the simple way to look at English grammar and then just fill up values there. So you could do grammar-based sentence generation, but this has the problem that I cannot guarantee meaningful sentences. So you will get ridiculous sentences like green idea, sleep furiously, or I ate a table and things like that. Okay, so that obviously would have looked very stupid when you're presenting to the particularly school students. So we came up with a mechanism, which was one of my students' PhD thesis, to use a template structures and use that to generate sentences. So we generate adequate variation. So when you say John is going to market, I know it is a go in the present tense and with a person in the as a subject and a place as the object. So using that kind of a structure, what is given, what shown here, you can actually now fill different subjects, but I don't fill any noun there. I will only put person nouns there. Similarly, object, I will only put places there. So you will say John is going to school, John is going to Bombay, John is going to somewhere, but it will not say John is going to cabbage or John is going to banana or something like that. Right? So that's something that we were able to do quite comfortably. And so it ensured reasonably meaningful sentences. You can still come up with some stupidities, but it's not as stupid as I'm eating a table, for example, and still ensures a very good range of sentences. So, for example, if you have 10 person names and 10 place names, that immediately gives you 100 sentences of this type, right? So that was something that we did quite well, and it worked out quite well. And we used then grammar rules to put the specifications into the sentence, and that is used to generate feedback. So which rule is violated in the solution provided, that kind of gives me an answer as to what is wrong with the answer, and then what could be done to improve it. So we also could build a set of constraints, so it will improve the feedback. So subject and verb should be in the same number. So these are constraints that could be checked in the system. So this is currently available in the labs for whatever labs we have for English, but we actually need to take it further from there. Okay, so did OLAPs work? I think initially when though we were doing a lot of training, etc., it did work to some extent as of 2 years back. Because the organic adoption was still very low, because there is no strong motivation to do, because for whatever reason. And we did try to reach as many schools as possible, particularly in the CBSE side, but we still found it was slowly growing, but not a very high rate of adoption. And then the pandemic struck, and we found that the usage actually shot up. So we are finding traffic on the website now almost 3 to 4 times than what it was there just before the pandemic. And then NCERT and CBSE actually came up, and we have done at least about a dozen national broadcast programs from NCERT and CBSE to encourage teachers to use it and to promote it across schools. So they have been very happy, and I think one of the reviews, the Ministry of Education actually said, OLAP saved the last year as students could do their, at least make some reasonable attempt at their labs. So looking ahead, it was been a very, very satisfying experience so far to see that we've been able to make a big difference to the educational setup in the country during the pandemic time. And today CBSE and NCERT are also happy and looking for more labs. So we have actually working with MIT to take up this further with a grander proposal. And at that time, we do intend to look at all these aspects that I talked about and come up with a better, more appealing labs. So it would be something that can actually set as benchmark for across the world, because I don't think there is a a repository of this type that's available anywhere. So we need to have more work in more classes and subjects. That's also in the kind, and maybe more innovations to improve effectiveness beyond what I have said. So I think that's about that I wanted to do. So it's half an hour, so I think I'll stop here and hand it over to Kumar. Over to you, Hyderabad.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for sharing your experiences on OLAPs, a virtual environment for simulating